Hello, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of Practice. This show is a look into my digital art workflow. I'm Stuart. I'm a 3D artist, illustrator, animator, and your pal, and I'm excited, as always, to have you back with me for another episode this week. As you can tell, so far we're working on the deck for a skateboard. I have to say, this is a little bit of a change of pace for the last handful of, really more than a handful, the last 10 or 15 episodes have been really related to developing these fantasy characters, this huge library of fantasy characters. And we've recently crossed the 100 episode threshold and took a little bit of time off and really had an awesome chance to refresh the batteries a little bit. And I'm pumped to be back again this week and thought I'd change things up a little bit and go with something a little more simple and something not character related. So we're doing a little bit of hard surface modeling here today, working on a cool old school 80s skateboard. So, the deck was fairly simple. We started with a cube that we subdivided a couple of times and then threw into a subdivision surface to get a little bit of smoothing in that tail area. And now we've got a couple of cylinders that we're just putting a little bit of a bevel on, a little bit of creating a circular cut, like a loop cut in the middle to create sort of an indentation where the bearings will sit. Now we're throwing another little cylinder in there to create the bearings. And of course, then we're going to start modeling out the trucks. Really just a simple series of cylinders here that we're throwing on top of each other. I got to say, this was a really fun one. I love skateboarding. When I was a teenager, I lived and breathed for this stuff. I worked at a skate shop. I went to the skate park all the time. I built a fun box and a ramp in front of my parents' house and spent, most of my free time just skateboarding or learning about it or reading the magazines and checking all that stuff out. I have to say that I think skateboarding culture probably had an influence to some degree on me becoming an illustrator and designer. It's very visually rich. The graphics on the skateboards and all the cool T-shirts and stuff, and not to mention the magazine that I subscribed to, Transworld, really had pretty nice layouts, and it was fairly sophisticated for a skate mag. So at least that was my perception as a 13-year-old kid. But in any case, now what we're going to do is we're going to grab the trucks and the wheels, and we're just going to use instances to copy these. And, that keeps things really, really flexible because I can make changes to one truck and those will be automatically reflected in the instance. Now, I did have to rotate it 180 degrees, but that's, the only changes you can make to an instance typically are like PSR, position, scale, rotation kind of stuff. But if you're just going to be doing, if the only difference between one truck and the other is a simple 180 degree rotation, really your best bet is to use instances. And you'll see as the show goes on, I make tweaks and adjustments like right here, and I don't have to worry about doing that twice. It's automatically captured in the instance. So handy dandy stuff. Now I'm just sort of adding the bushing area to the truck, just continuing to compile details on there. Even a little curve to the board. One of the things I did is I loop selected the edge of the board and used period to make the edges a little hard. If you're in a subdivision surface, you can make selections of certain areas that you want to, usually like a plane selection or an edge selection. And if you hold period and drag the mouse from left to right, you can adjust the effect, the rounding effect that the subdivision surface will have on that bit of geometry. And the edge of the board was feeling a little too soft and round, so I, added or subtracted, I should say, a little bit of the softness from that to get you a little bit more of a hard edge. You can see I'm adding some bolts to the top of the trucks, and again, that's the type of thing I do that in one truck, and they're automatically added to the other. So the case or instances are super, super handy. Now we're going to get into some texturing, really simple stuff here. Noise at a small scale is just perfect for the grip tape. This was really simple, worked out really well, actually. Just made it kind of small, the scale of the noise. Just made some dark gray and light gray. and added, and I don't know if I needed to do this, but I used the same texture just to add a little bit of bump, because I felt like when we started to get into lighting, that would give us just a slightly more realistic look for the skateboard. I want it to go loud and bright on the colors here, so we're going with a pretty rad purple color. You can see I'm adjusting the specularity. I was trying to match what painted wood would look like. So there's no specular on the grip tape because it's not a reflective surface at all. And now you see I'm adding true reflection to what's going to be the trucks and the hardware. Those are shiny metal. And yellow being a complementary color of purple, I thought that would be a great combination. Notice that the truck here was missing a bit of detail, actually. So I'm just going to modify this cube to form the bit of the axle that goes around the cushioning. Or the kingpin, I should say, is that circular bit. So now we're just sort of expanding that, making some cuts so we can add a bit of rounding. This is a bit of a simplified version of a truck. I didn't feel the need to get in there and do every little detail super accurately. I think, for our final output, which is going to be like a turntable 360 animated GIF, we didn't need that level of detail. It wasn't required. So now I did want to create a little graphic for the bottom of the board. And you'll see I'm booting up Illustrator here so we can do that. I'm going to make a very simple little lightning bolt in Illustrator. What I'm doing is I'm using the width tool, which is super handy. I need to use Shift W to bring that tool up, and you can actually adjust the thickness of a stroke. I'm doing that to taper the ends of this lightning bolt. Just making a few tweaks to the shape, trying to get it lined up nicely, looking good. And so once I get happy with the shape here, I very simply export this as a ping with no background, and it'll map beautifully on top of our other textures. I'm just loading that into a material, throwing it on the alpha channel, and then making a selection on the bottom of the board where I want to put the lightning bolt. It didn't align perfectly at first, so I used this, I don't even know what you call this tool, the UV modifying tool, whatever. It's on the left-hand side, second from the top, little checkerboard thing. Decided that it was occupying too small a portion on the bottom of the board, so I made a slightly larger selection here. Threw it back in. And you can go through and just sort of adjust the size and position by hand. So I'm kind of just lining that up by eye on the bottom of the board. And I was actually able to match the color of the wheels and the color of the graphic fairly quickly. I sort of lucked out there. I assumed that I would have to go in and either adjust the Illustrator file or the wheel color to match, but they're pretty darn close without me even copying hex values. So that's pretty cool. Now what I'm doing, you've probably seen me do this a whole bunch of times, but what I'm doing is just taking a simple spline at a 90 degrees, adding a chamfer to the bottom edge, and then copying those and putting them inside a loft NURB, and that gives us this little cyclorama background, which is a really nice, smooth kind of background to create. And instead of using just an actual background object, I've been enjoying using this curved background shape called a cyclorama or a cyc. Because it gives you a nice gradient and sort of shadow in the background. And I like the way that the light bounces up and back into the scene, give you, a slightly more realistic look. So I'm a fan of those. And the lighting setup here is going to be super simple. Little overhead spotlight and a sky object with a luminant gradient applied. So throwing together a couple quick test renderings. here's this luminant gradient that I'm creating for the sky objects. The other benefit to adding this is that it's going to give us a more realistic reflection on the trucks, or the any reflected surface really, but the trucks here in particular. Reflections are only as beautiful as the things that they're reflecting around them, right? And if it's a totally blank environment, you're going to have very little on the trucks that are reflected, except the portions of the object itself that are sort of in the line of sight for being reflected. But if you add a gradient to the sky object, then you're going to have this nice sort of gradated reflection. And that gives you a really, really nice metallic look. If you ever throw a reflection on something and you're feeling like it's not very metallic looking, it's probably because there's nothing to reflect. So try a sky object, try an HDRI map, try some other objects in the scene, and that'll probably help you out a good deal. Now what I was thinking about doing here was using a wood surface to create like a subtle bump map that would make the board look like painted wood, but I decided that the scene really didn't need it. A nice simple board was going to be fine. And then I also decided that I wanted sort of a monochromatic look, and I wanted that lightning bolt to really, really stick out. So I went with a background that's almost the same color as the board itself, just a little bit darker and a little bit bluer. And I thought that created some really nice color harmony there. What I'm doing now is just setting up a very simple animation. 2 keyframes, just rotating this guy 360 degrees. Super simple. I also decided at the last minute here that I wanted a little bit more smoothness out of the board, so I pushed up the subdivisions in the subdivision surface just a hair. You can see the smoothing go up there, and I think that worked. And it wasn't super high polygon, so the rendering times weren't too bad. I think also around this point, as I'm doing my test renderings, I decided that the board was a little bit static, just straight up and down like this, so I decided to grab the components and just tilt them just a hair, just to give a little bit more interest to the position of the board. It's a little bit more of a dynamic look. Another thing I did actually a few minutes ago that I forgot to mention is I felt like the wheels had kind of a dark, hard sort of look, and the rubbery, plasticky material that wheels are made out of typically let a little bit of light penetrate through the surface and don't have a super dark look. They tend to be brighter than things like the wood around them. So I added just a little bit of, subsurface scattering to that object, which gave me a much more realistic look for the wheels. And now I'm rendering out frames, and the beauty of these being pre-recorded is that I can simply fast forward through that stuff. So we're burning through these frames ultra quick, getting close to the final output. So here I'm popping Photoshop open. I'm going to compile these guys quickly into a GIF. Saving out frames here. There we go. Quick little animation. And my computer at this point was telling me, hey man, quit recording so many videos, we're almost out of space. Some quick color correction, just get it a little bit brighter, a little more vivid. And then we're going to export this thing. The other beauty about going with sort of a low color frequency is the file size is super manageable for GIFs. So here you have it. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe. If you have any further questions, don't hesitate to drop one in the comments below. If you want to keep up with me and the work that I'm doing, please check me out on Instagram at DLGNCE. And until next week, this is Stuart saying goodbye. Thanks.